Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome again to our uh, family meeting. This is a family meeting that's dealing with recovery support. My name is Craig, and yes, glad to be with you today. And so today we're going to be sharing an article from experiencerecovery.com. You can go online, retrieve this article. And so let me give you the title of the article that I'm making mention of. And there we go. The importance of identifying addiction triggers. This is a two-part. And so today we're going to do in part one of family recovery support. The importance of identifying addiction triggers. All right. And so let's talk about it. So the first topic of discussion we want to have is identifying addiction triggers is necessary for recovery. When I got this article, I just thought about some of the. I am someone who is in recovery as well. I am a peer. I'm a certified peer recovery specialist, so that means that I have some experience with residential treatment, experience with the uses of alcohol and substances, drugs, that is. And so I was fortunate to go through a peer recovery community for substance abuse. And so some of the tools and some of the coping mechanisms that I recall in my mind was that being able to identify some of the triggers we talked about in treatment was identifying not only triggers, but cravings and urges. And so that stuck out important to me. So I want to bring this article to the forefront and share it with some people, or for most people, who have never heard or never been in a residential treatment. So give you some insight of what this article is talking about when it comes to triggers. All right. So let's get right into it. This article starts off by saying, when we talk about addiction triggers, it is a common misconception that quitting drugs or drinking is just a matter of stopping. People think, what's the big deal? Just don't put drugs or alcohol in your body and move on with your life. Unfortunately, overcoming addiction is not an easy challenge. Drug addiction led to nearly 92,000 fatal overdoses in the U.S. in the year 2020. Drug-involved overdoses are at an all-time high. We believe, this article says, it is fair to say that most of them desperately wanted to get sober. If addicted people could simply make the decision to get sober, snap their fingers, and turn their lives around, they would. But having a substance use disorder is a complicated endeavor. Recovery is not easy, and most people require addiction treatment to reclaim their lives once they become addicted to drugs or alcohol. Triggers provide a perfect example of why staying sober isn't as simple as it seems. For many individuals, recognizing and preventing relapse is one of the most challenging aspects of recovery, unless you have experienced them personally. You cannot imagine how difficult it can be to navigate a trigger without giving in to temptation. Okay, so it's not as turning on a switch. Let's talk about triggers and explain why identifying them is vital to the recovery process. This will not only help sober people stay sober, it would also educate those who don't fully understand the disease of addiction. All right, let's take a deeper dive. All right, and so the next topic of discussion is, what are addiction triggers? What are addiction triggers? In simple terms, a trigger is anything that brings back thoughts, feelings, or memories of an addiction. Triggers happen for people who are in recovery from a substance use disorder, but they can also happen for people who have been hooked on gambling, sex, food, and other types of behavioral addictions. Sometimes a trigger can lead to a craving, which is defined as an intense desire to do something. One of the most important things to understand in addiction recovery is the triggers that can lead to relapse. Triggers can be both internal and external. Internal triggers are related to emotions such as anger, fear, sadness, or boredom, while external triggers are related to people, places, and things associated with past drug or alcohol use. It's essential to recognize the signs of an addiction trigger so you can take steps to avoid it or manage it in a healthier way, such as evading certain people or places that could be associated with substance abuse, practicing mindfulness and self-care, and learning how to cope with difficult emotions effectively. This is some good stuff. It talks about triggers can be both internal and external. All right. It said understanding relapse triggers and coping with cravings is essential in maintaining sobriety and developing better habits. So, by doing an inventory, taking an assessment of how we're feeling, making an adjustment, avoiding people, places, and things that can trigger or bring back old memories. And so these are things that comes with the territory of being able to identify what your trigger, what my triggers are, and be able to use some coping skills. And we're going to get into some coping skills and what some of the triggers can and what they do look like. And so there's different aspects, and so this article is going to cover some. So the next topic of discussion, that is common types of addiction triggers and recovery. All right, addiction triggers can be challenging to identify, especially in the early stages of recovery. But understanding and recognizing them is critical to successful long-term sobriety. The triggers can be broken down into several categories, including environmental, emotional, behavioral, and psychological. By knowing what common addiction triggers exist, you can better manage them and take steps to avoid relapse. Let's learn more about each type of addiction relapse trigger and how to avoid them. All right, so let's dig. We're gonna keep digging until we find and be able to identify what are some of the triggers that this article is talking about. First one we want to look at is environmental triggers. People, places, and things. Environmental addiction triggers are external factors that can lead to a relapse and recovery. These triggers can include people, places, and events and emotions that remind us of the addiction. Some of the most common examples of environmental triggers include: number one, being in a specific location, for example, bars, neighborhoods associated with past use. Two, spending time with people who actively use drugs or alcohol. Three, experiencing financial problems or stress from work or academy. Four, experiencing conflicts such as romantic breakups and divorce. Five, emotional occasions such as vacations, anniversaries, celebrations, and holidays. And six, seeing substance-related marketing on social media, movies, or TV shows. All right, and these are environmental triggers. All right, that we are, if we're not aware of, they can be subliminally implied or can be attack, or can be a trigger that can lead to a relapse if we're not mindful of what they look like and how to respond to them appropriately. The best way to avoid environmental addiction triggers is to become aware of your surroundings and the people around you. Being around certain people can lead to relapse, so limiting your contact with them is crucial. Additional, taking time out for yourself and engaging in activities such as exercise, meditation, or reading can help reduce any negative emotions and stress that could lead to substance use. With an awareness of potential triggers and a plan in place for avoiding them, you can work toward achieving long-term sobriety. All right, and so that one deals with environmental triggers, people, places, and things. Some of the things that you can look out for, be aware of, and some tools that you can use. And so some of the tools that they make mention of is engaging in exercise, meditation, or reading a book, and because it helps you navigate through the negative emotion and stress. The second part of common types of addiction triggers are emotional triggers. Emotion triggers consist of stress, anxiety, and depressions. All right. And so emotional triggers are emotional states that can lead to relapse and recovery. These emotional states can range from anger, sadness, and loneliness to boredom or stress. Let me read that again, because we're talking about common types of addiction triggers and recovery. And first, when we talked about environmental trigger, people, places, and thing. Now we're talking about emotional triggers, stress, anxiety, depression. And so the first line of this part let us know that emotional triggers are emotional states that can lead to relapse and recovery. These emotional states can range from anger, sadness, and loneliness to boredom or stress. Experiencing strong emotions such as anger, sadness, or joy can also act as a reminder or increase the urge to use. It is important to recognize these emotional triggers and manage them appropriately. Otherwise, it could lead someone down a path of substance abuse without even realizing what has happened. This thing is very powerful, very sneaky. So if you're not up on your A game, you're not paying attention to some of the internal and external cues from stimuli, you can be misled or you can lead to relapse. So be mindful to some of the things that may give you glimpses and hints of triggers that, if you're not aware of, can lead you down the wrong path. The following are some common examples of emotional triggers. All right, so we're going to go over some of the common examples of emotional triggers. Number one, feeling lonely or isolated. Remember, we're talking about emotional triggers. So these are internal factors, okay? Feeling lonely or isolated, feeling overwhelmed by activities and responsibilities, right? Facing rejection or criticism from others, right? Feeling powerless in certain situations, being too hard on yourself for mistakes made in the past, right? Reduced self-esteem due to the unrealistic portrayal of real life or on social media. Now, this is something a lot of people, I believe, are faced with when it comes to reduced self-esteem due to the unrealistic portrayal of real life on social media, right? So if you're a big fan of social media, if you can't distinguish or make the distinction from what is real and unrealistic, take some time and have a critical thinking process within yourself and make the decision and process and use the appropriate choice in what path you want to take. A lot of times our perception is very key to how we behave. So it's one of the determining factors of how we perceive and activating event and how we believe it. Once we perceive it, then we begin to believe. We have a belief system, and that belief system will give us the final outcome of how we behave or respond to that belief. All right. So the next one talks about hearing songs associated with an addiction, experiencing strong emotions such as anger or joy, experiencing intense worry, fear, and uncertainty about sobriety, frustrated with their progress and recovery. It is important to practice self-care by engaging in healthy activities such as exercise and meditation to reduce the risk of relapse due to emotional addiction triggered. Building a solid support system with friends and family who understand your recovery journey is also beneficial. So surround yourself with positive people, whether it's families and friends, that who will have your back when it comes, especially when they know that you come from a past lifestyle that dealt with alcohol or drug abuse. And so if you put people in place or surround yourself with people who has a positive perspective on life and who are your biggest fan or encourager, cling on to them. You know, learn how they cope. And if they're exercising, if they're eating right, they're having self-care, ultimately by you associating with them frequently, regularly, I believe that some of these traits will rub off on you as well. Additionally, attending regular therapy sessions where you can discuss any challenges you face to develop practical coping skills is fundamental. All right. And so always a professional person who you can vent or who you can share, someone you can confide in, accountability partner. So that's always good. Following these strategies can reduce the risk of relapse due to emotional addiction triggers and maintain long-term sobriety. So we went over the first one, environmental. Second one, emotional. Third one, we want to go over, and that is behavioral triggers. All right. Got a thumbs up. All right. Thank you for that thumbs up. All right. And so we appreciate whoever's watching. And so it's great to have you on board. So we're talking about behavior. This is the next common type trigger, and that is behavior triggers, routines, and habits. Behavior triggers are activities and habits that can lead to relapse and recovery. These triggers can involve certain behaviors, such as going to a bar or club or even boredom. Talking about behaviors. Remember, I talked about your perception, your belief, your behavior, which is the consequences of your thought process and what you believe of the actual activating event. Behavioral addiction triggers can also be anything from seeing drug-related content online, engaging in activities associated with addiction, such as playing video games, or even just having free time without anything to do. Right? Behavior is so important. Some of the most common examples of behavioral triggers include, let's find out what they are. Having too much idle time without meaningful projects or activity. Wow. You know, I remember being in a therapeutic treatment program, and the counselor, who was also the supervisor, says, most people that's in recovery they stay busy, they stay active because they don't have time to sit around and think about things that would draw them back into their past lifestyle. So he says people try to keep their mind constantly focused on doing things that would improve their lifestyle. So they're always working, doing things, volunteering, helping others, going to meetings, learning more about education, vocational, life skills, and all these things, doing constantly inventory on oneself, how we can become better than we were yesterday, today, and tomorrow. All right. And so having too much idle times without meaningful projects or activities, not maintaining healthy eating and sleep routines. All right. Setting unrealistic expectations and goals without processes for achieving them. Skipping therapy sessions or meetings. Let me read that again. Skipping therapy sessions or meetings. Not having a plan for how to cope with stressful situations or trigger. That is powerful. Not having a plan for how to cope with stressful situations or triggers. One of the most important tips for avoiding behavioral trigger is to create a new routine that does not involve activities associated with substance use. Keep them busy. There go that word. Keep them busy and engaging in activities such as reading, writing, exercising, or going for a walk are all great alternatives to fill any free time that may be available. Remember, I made mention that we're going to be talking about some coping skills, and these are what we call coping skills by keeping busy and engaging in activities such as reading, writing, exercise, or going for a walk are all great alternatives to fill any free time that may be available. Additionally, it is beneficial to set clear and healthy boundaries with individuals in your network who still use drugs or alcohol. Set healthy boundaries. All right? And so we're going to move on. We went over the first one was environmental triggers. Right? Boom, we went over environmental triggers. The second one, we talked about emotional triggers. The third one, behavioral triggers. All right? And so now we want to go a little deeper. The psychological triggers. Psychological trigger, negative thoughts, beliefs. All right? Psychological triggers, also known as cognitive addiction triggers, are negative thoughts and beliefs that can lead to relapse and recovery. These psychological triggers can involve anything from self-doubt and fear of failure to feelings of worthlessness or shame. Psychological triggers often go hand in hand with emotional triggers as they stem from the exact root cause, unresolved trauma or stress. Whew. Going deep. They're going a little deep. We're taking a deep dive. All right. Hold on, everybody. We're going for a little ride. All right. So it says individual in recovery need to be aware of their psychological triggers to manage them appropriately and reduce the risk of relapse due to these mental health issues. Some examples of psychological addiction triggers include feeling overwhelmed by the desire to escape from reality. You know, I was told when I used to try to escape what we call escapism or escape from reality by going on a trip or going on by using drugs, cut it short, is that once the drug wear off, problems, situations, whatever you're facing are still going to be there if they don't get resolved with a clear mind. Identifying with negative beliefs about oneself, such as I'm not good enough. Those are self-talk, right? So it says psychological and emotional. They are triggers. That is, they oftentimes go hand in hand. All right. And so judging oneself harshly for perceived failings or mistake. Don't be hard on yourself. Don't be hard on yourself. Just because your sobriety may not be as extensive as someone else's sobriety doesn't matter. Celebrate the small victory. All right. Don't be so hard on yourself. All right. Blaming oneself for bad outcomes without considering other factors. Right. Uh, Perception. These are perceptions as well. Psychological, negative thoughts and belief. Negative thinking and ruminating on the past. All right. So don't dwell on the past. Psychological addiction triggers can be avoided by taking proactive steps to address the underlying issues causing them. Going down to the root cause of what is the exact underlying factors. These this includes identifying and addressing unresolved trauma or stress and change negative thoughts and belief about oneself. When I was in, so I'm gonna share as I'm be reading because it helps me to reflect upon some of the coping skills that I learned. And one of the things we used to call that we use or exercise that we use, and that is positive reinforcement. So when you having negative thoughts and belief about oneself, replace those negative thoughts or belief with positive one, right? And I utilize it for myself, and I get great results when I use positive reinforcement. Never allow negativity to outweigh the positivity in your life, because once you begin to think positive, you have positive outcomes. Just give it a try and comment. Let me know if you ever use it, and if it works, keep using it. That's all you have to do. I don't want the credit for it, as long as you're making progress in your recovery and that your sobriety is going smoothly. You're going to run into some bumps. Okay, that's all right. Brush your shoulders off. Developing strong coping skills such as relaxation techniques. Mindfulness can also help reduce stress while gradually reintroducing positive self-care activities will help bring balance and joy into our lives. Connecting with others in meaningful ways and increasing positive experiences is also essential. All right. So there is some exercises that you can utilize to reduce stress. All right. Behavioral modification therapy exercises, desensitization. They are exercises that you can practice. If you don't know how to utilize them, I suggest that you learn them, because sometimes we can get overwhelmed and our thoughts can be going here and there if we don't pause, relax, and ponder what is going on within and without around us. We can, once we utilize some type of behavior exercises, modification exercise, they are create tools that you can use to get you back centered and how you're feeling and how you're going to respond to a given situation. All right. Next, we want to talk about, and this is the last part of our part one section. So hopefully in the future we will go over part two. All right. But part one today is the importance of identifying addiction triggers and recovery. All right. And so it says identifying addiction triggers is essential to recovery, as it helps individuals better understand their cravings and thought patterns. Knowing what can tempt you to use substances or cause a relapse helps prepare for challenges ahead and allows for proactive coping strategies. Identifying and managing addiction triggers is also a vital component of relapse prevention. Once someone in recovery knows what triggers them, they are in a much better position to stay sober one day at a time. Some tactics to identify addiction triggers include: number one, journaling and self-reflection. Journaling and self-reflection are essential tools for identifying and managing addiction triggers. Keeping a regular record of your experiences with triggers can help you learn from past instances and build more robust strategies for future recovery efforts. Self-reflection can help to identify negative thought patterns and underlying beliefs that may lead to relapse. At the same time, journaling can provide a safe space to document emotions, thoughts, and feelings surrounding the trigger to gain better insight into the trigger themselves. Two, keeping a trigger diary. Keeping a trigger diary is an effective way for individuals to identify and anticipate triggers in their daily lives. When someone records detailed information on what, who, when, and where was the motivation before their use or craving, they can gain insight into how to reduce temptation or take a preventive action. A trigger diary can also help uncover underlying causes of use or craving, including underlying emotions and environmental events that may lead to substance abuse. Furthermore, a trigger diary can allow people to recover to recognize patterns in their behaviors and develop more effective coping strategies for future situations. Three, identifying high-risk situations. Identifying high-risk situations is essential in recognizing potential triggers and taking preemptive action. High-risk situations can include places, people, and events that have previously resulted in substance abuse. For an example, certain social gatherings in the past may have been associated with drinking, so by avoiding such circumstances, a person can prevent exposure to their addiction trigger. By becoming aware of the environment or people that increase the risk of using or craving, a person can create boundaries to reduce temptation. Taking the time to identify and recognize high-risk situations can help individuals stay safer on their road to recovery. Four, get a professional assessment by a therapist or addiction specialist. All right? And that is a professional assessment or counseling by a therapist or addiction specialist is important in understanding addiction triggers. A specialist can provide the necessary tools to identify triggers and help develop a relapse prevention plan to manage and reduce the risk of relapse. All right, a relapse prevention plan. A professional assessment may include psychological testing and interview and medical evaluation and a personal history and family dynamic discussion. Through this comprehensive assessment, therapists or specialists can help uncover underlying causes of substance abuse and create customized treatment plans tailored to individual needs that address those underlying causes. This specialized attention can go a long way in helping people in recovery identify their triggers and learn how to prevent further addiction. All right. And so that's it for now. Part one. Today we were talking about the importance of identifying addiction triggers. Part one. So this has been our family recovery support, and we're thankful for all those who have watched. If you know someone who's struggling with any alcohol or drug addiction, please help them to get help with professional assistance. It's been great. Thank you for tuning in. This has been we talked about today, the importance of identifying addiction triggers, part one. All right. And so until the next time, stay safe, have a blessed day, and stay healthy. Take care, everybody.